I have also learned something that troubles me deeply.
Meghan's world just came crashing down. Behind closed palace doors, King Charles signed documents that changed everything. 3 words were whispered through the corridors of Buckingham Palace that sent shockwaves across the Atlantic. It's over.
I would never want someone else to feel that way, and I would never want someone else to be making those sort of plans.
When the news hit Montecito, Meghan froze. Her team scrambled. Harry was blindsided. For the first time since leaving royal life, there's no going back, no negotiations, no loopholes. The king has spoken, and what he's done is absolutely irreversible. You won't believe what happens next. The British royal family has long been a subject of intense public fascination, but recent developments suggest that the relationship between King Charles and the Duchess of Sussex has reached a critical turning point. According to multiple palace insiders, the king has reportedly made what sources are describing as a definitive decision regarding Meghan Markle's connection to the royal institution, marking what many believe to be the end of a tumultuous chapter that began when she married Prince Harry in 2018. Reports emerging from Buckingham Palace indicate that this decision was not made impulsively or in response to any single event. Rather, it appears to be the culmination of months, if not years, of growing concern within royal circles about how the Duchess has positioned herself in relation to the monarchy since stepping back from official duties in 2020. Those close to the matter suggest that the king's approach has been measured and deliberate, characterized by careful observation rather than reactive judgment. The situation reportedly intensified over recent months as palace officials observed what they perceived to be a pattern of behavior that blurred the boundaries between Meghan's private ventures and her former royal status. Sources within the institution claim that there was growing unease about the way the Duchess continued to reference or hint at her royal connections in various public appearances, brand initiatives, and media projects. While these references were often subtle, insiders suggest they created confusion about whether she maintained an active relationship with the royal family. One of the key concerns that allegedly troubled King Charles was the strategic use of royal imagery and associations in ways that seem to suggest an ongoing institutional connection. Palace observers noted that despite having formally stepped away from royal duties, there appeared to be careful positioning in public messaging that maintained a link to the monarchy's prestige and history. This, according to those familiar with the king's thinking, raised questions about whether clear enough boundaries had been established when the Sussexes departed for North America. The late Queen Elizabeth had reportedly expressed her own concerns during her lifetime, particularly regarding the continued use of royal styling and titles. Sources suggest that she had instructed the Duchess not to use certain forms of address, but these instructions were not always followed. This caused frustration among senior royals, particularly Prince William, who is said to have been deeply troubled by what he viewed as a disregard for the Queen's wishes. As the situation developed, King Charles is reported to have consulted extensively with his most trusted advisors. These were not routine meetings, but rather intensive strategy sessions that brought together communications experts, legal advisors, protocol specialists, and members of the Privy Council. The discussions reportedly focused on assessing the long-term implications of allowing the current ambiguity to continue versus taking decisive action to establish clear boundaries. According to those present at these meetings, the king approached the matter with characteristic calm and deliberation. He listened carefully to various perspectives and examined detailed documentation of the Duchess's public activities, media appearances, and brand strategies. The analysis reportedly revealed a concerning pattern where the line between personal enterprise and royal association had become increasingly blurred, creating potential risks for the institution's reputation and control over its own narrative. One particularly significant concern raised by advisors was the impact this situation could have on the monarchy's future. With the rise of social media influencers and celebrity culture, the traditional boundaries that separated royal life from commercial enterprise were becoming harder to maintain. The Duchess, with her background in entertainment and her substantial global following, represented a new kind of challenge that the institution had never previously encountered. Her ability to command media attention and shape public narratives posed questions about who ultimately controlled the royal story. The king's advisors reportedly warned him that without firm action, the situation could escalate beyond the palace's ability to manage it effectively. They pointed to the potential for confusion in the public mind between official royal messaging and independent ventures that drew upon royal connections. There were concerns about international perception, particularly in the United States, where the Duchess maintained a strong presence and where understanding of royal protocols and boundaries was less established. Another factor that weighed heavily in the discussions was the impact on other members of the royal family, particularly the Prince and Princess of Wales. William has been preparing for his future role as king and has been working with his father on plans to streamline the monarchy and create a more focused, efficient institution. Reports suggest that he has been advocating for a stricter approach to who holds titles and performs royal duties, with several minor royals potentially facing changes to their status as part of this modernisation effort. The situation with the Duchess of Sussex reportedly complicated these plans. As long as the ambiguity about her relationship with the institution remained, it became harder to enforce consistent standards about royal identity and representation. Sources suggest that William was particularly vocal about the need for clear boundaries, arguing that the monarchy's credibility depended on the public understanding exactly who spoke for the institution and who did not. Throughout this period, King Charles is said to have maintained hope that the situation would resolve itself naturally. He reportedly preferred to avoid confrontation and was reluctant to take actions that might be perceived as punitive or vindictive. However, as the weeks progressed, it became increasingly clear to those around him that the issue was not going to fade away on its own. Instead, palace watchers observed what they described as an escalation, with new projects and public appearances that seemed to push the boundaries even further. The final sequence of events that led to the king's decision reportedly involved several high-profile developments that convinced even the most cautious advisors that action could no longer be delayed. These included a new brand launch, carefully crafted public statements, and an international campaign that raised eyebrows among senior palace officials. While the specific details of these initiatives have not been made public, sources indicate that they represented a tipping point where the palace felt its hand was being forced. One advisor is reported to have told the king directly that the situation would not resolve itself and that without intervention, the palace risked losing control of the royal narrative entirely. This stark assessment apparently resonated with Charles, who had spent his entire life understanding the importance of protecting the monarchy's reputation and ensuring its relevance for future generations. The realization that inaction posed its own significant risks appears to have been a turning point in his thinking. When the king's decision was finally communicated to California, the response was reportedly immediate and intense. According to sources close to the situation, the news reached Montecito through official but discreet channels, delivered in a manner that left no room for misinterpretation. Unlike previous communications from the palace, which often contained diplomatic language and careful phrasing designed to soften difficult messages, this notification was clear and unambiguous in its finality. Those familiar with the moment describe the Duchess's initial reaction as one of complete shock. Reports suggest that she had not anticipated such a definitive stance from King Charles, having perhaps believed that the family would always leave some possibility for future reconciliation or reinstatement. The realization that the door was being firmly closed rather than merely left ajar appears to have been profoundly unsettling. Sources indicate that her first response was not anger, but rather disbelief, as she reportedly read and reread the communication, trying to understand its full implications. The atmosphere within the Sussex household allegedly shifted rapidly from confusion to crisis management. Members of the Duchess's team are said to have gone into what insiders described as panic mode, immediately beginning to assess the situation and its potential ramifications. Phone calls were made, meetings were hastily arranged, and discussions began about how to respond to this unexpected development. The sense of urgency reportedly stemmed from the recognition that this was not a temporary setback or a negotiable position, but rather a permanent change in the relationship between the Duchess and the royal institution. According to those with knowledge of the events, Meghan began asking pointed questions about who had influenced the king's decision and why it was being implemented at this particular moment. She reportedly wanted to understand the process that had led to this outcome and whether there had been any opportunity for dialogue or negotiation before the final determination was made. The lack of warning or preliminary discussion appears to have contributed to the sense of betrayal that sources say she expressed to those around her. As the full weight of the decision settled in, the emotional impact reportedly became more visible. Insiders describe a scene of considerable distress, with the Duchess expressing feelings of being unfairly targeted and cut off from an institution she had once been part of. The tears and frustration that followed were said to reflect not just disappointment, but a deeper fear about what this meant for her future public role and her ability to maintain the platform she had been building since leaving royal duties. For the first time since departing the United Kingdom, sources suggest the Duchess found herself facing a situation where she was not being sidelined or ignored, but actively excluded with formal institutional backing. This distinction appears to have been significant. Previous tensions had involved media criticism, public speculation, and family disagreements, but there had always been some residual connection to the royal family through her marriage to Harry and the couple's continued use of their titles. This decision reportedly represented something different, a clear institutional boundary that redrew the lines of what was and was not permissible. Prince Harry's role in this situation has been particularly complex and emotionally fraught. According to palace sources, the king chose to inform his younger son of the decision before it was communicated to Meghan, not as a gesture of favoritism, but out of a belief that Harry deserved to hear it directly from his father rather than discovering it through other channels. This conversation between father and son is reported to have been difficult and emotionally charged, though conducted with the civility that both men have tried to maintain despite their strained relationship. Those familiar with the exchange say that Harry's reaction combined shock with a deep sense of frustration. He reportedly pushed back against his father's decision, asking for time to find alternative solutions and questioning whether such a definitive stance was truly necessary. Harry is said to have requested that the king reconsider, or at least soften the language and implications of the decision, hoping to preserve some possibility for future healing and reconciliation within the family. However, King Charles reportedly remained firm in his position. Sources describe his tone during the conversation as respectful and measured, but absolutely resolute. He apparently explained his reasoning to his son, outlining the concerns that had led to this point and the advice he had received from his closest counselors. The king is said to have made clear that this was not a decision made lightly or in anger, but rather one deemed necessary for the protection and stability of the institution he now leads. For Harry, this moment reportedly represented a painful realization that he had been trying to avoid for years. The conversation with his father apparently crystallized the reality that he cannot successfully bridge the gap between his life in California with Meghan and his biological family in Britain. Sources suggest that he has long hoped to maintain connections with both worlds, serving as a link that might eventually lead to healing and understanding. The finality of his father's decision appears to have shattered that hope, at least for the foreseeable future. The emotional toll on Harry is reported to have been substantial. Those close to him indicate that he experienced genuine grief over this development, not just for himself, but for what it means for his wife and children. The prince has consistently tried to protect his family from the pressures and criticisms that come with royal life, and this decision from his father apparently felt like another instance where he was unable to shield them from institutional forces beyond his control. When Harry conveyed the news to Meghan, the impact on their household was reportedly immediate and profound. Both are said to have been emotional, with tears shed by husband and wife alike as they processed what this meant for their future. The conversation between them apparently touched on themes of fairness, family loyalty, institutional rigidity, and the challenges of navigating life outside the traditional royal framework while still being connected to it through marriage and lineage. Insiders suggest that Harry found himself once again in the role he has long resented, that of intermediary between two worlds that increasingly seem incompatible. He reportedly struggled with feelings of helplessness, frustrated by his inability to influence his father's thinking or to protect his wife from what he perceived as institutional coldness. The decision appears to have reopened old wounds related to his position within the family and his lifelong experience of feeling like a secondary figure despite his royal birth. The relationship between King Charles and Prince Harry has always been complex, marked by genuine affection, complicated by the demands of royal hierarchy and public duty. This latest development reportedly added a new layer of difficulty to their father-son bond. Unlike previous tensions that could potentially be smoothed over with time and private conversation, this decision carried institutional weight that made it less susceptible to personal reconciliation. The king was not acting solely as a father, but as the head of an ancient institution with responsibilities that extended far beyond family dynamics. Sources close to both men indicate that neither wanted this outcome. Charles reportedly wished that circumstances had allowed for a different resolution, while Harry is said to have hoped his father would find a way to accommodate both institutional concerns and family harmony. However, the collision between these competing priorities appears to have resulted in a choice that prioritized the monarchy's long-term stability over short-term family peace. In the days following the decision, the atmosphere in both Buckingham Palace and Montecito was reportedly tense and sorrowful. Palace staff observed a quietness around the king, who is said to have found no pleasure in the action he felt compelled to take. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the Sussex household was described as being in a state of upheaval as they grappled with the implications and began considering how to respond to this new reality. The formal documentation that emerged from Buckingham Palace reportedly contained specific provisions that fundamentally altered the parameters of the Duchess of Sussex's relationship with the royal institution. According to sources familiar with the contents, the directive was not simply a symbolic gesture or a vague statement of disapproval, but rather a detailed set of restrictions with clear institutional backing and enforceable consequences. The first major provision allegedly addresses the use of royal associations in commercial and public ventures. Reports indicate that the Duchess will no longer be permitted to reference, suggest, or imply any connection to the monarchy in her various projects, brand initiatives, or media appearances without obtaining explicit written permission from palace officials. This requirement represents a significant shift from the previous arrangement, where there existed what insiders described as a grey area that allowed for subtle nods to royal heritage without crossing into outright violation of established protocols. This restriction appears designed to address one of the primary concerns that had been troubling palace advisors for months. The ability to suggest royal connections without making direct claims had apparently created a situation where the Duchess could benefit from the prestige and interest associated with the monarchy while operating entirely independently of its control or oversight. By requiring advance written approval for any such references, the palace has reportedly established a mechanism to prevent this ambiguity from continuing. The second major element of the decision involves the withdrawal of what sources describe as informal privileges and courtesies that had continued even after the Sussexes stepped back from official duties. These are not the formal rights and responsibilities that come with working royal status, which were already relinquished in 2020, but rather the smaller, less visible accommodations that the institution had continued to provide. Reports suggest these included certain travel arrangements, access to specific social circles, and symbolic associations that carried benefits even without formal recognition. Palace insiders indicate that these privileges were never officially documented or publicly acknowledged, making them easy to overlook in discussions about the Sussex departure. However, their removal reportedly carries practical significance for how the Duchess can operate in various contexts, particularly in international settings where royal connections have traditionally opened doors and facilitated access. The decision to revoke these quiet accommodations appears intended to create a cleaner separation between the institution and the Duchess's independent activities. Perhaps most significantly, the directive allegedly addresses how the palace will respond to future controversies or disputes involving the Duchess. According to sources, the royal household will no longer intervene on her behalf when international incidents or public relations challenges arise. Previously, even after the Sussexes had moved to California, there were reportedly instances where palace staff would quietly work behind the scenes to smooth over difficult situations, provide context to media outlets, or use diplomatic channels to address complications. Under the new arrangement, these forms of institutional support have apparently been withdrawn entirely. The Duchess will be expected to manage her own public relations challenges, legal disputes, and media controversies without any assistance or protective intervention from the royal machinery. One palace source characterized this change as a necessary clarification that the institution cannot simultaneously allow independence while continuing to provide the safety net that comes with official royal status. This aspect of the decision reportedly reflects a broader concern about accountability and consequences. Palace advisors had apparently become frustrated with situations where the Duchess operated independently and sometimes controversially, while the palace still felt obligated to manage the diplomatic or reputational fallout. The new policy establishes that such protection is reserved exclusively for working members of the royal family who are subject to institutional oversight and control. Sources close to the king suggest that he viewed these measures not as punishment, but as necessary boundary setting that should have been implemented earlier. The palace has apparently been grappling with how to handle former working royals who maintain high public profiles, and this decision is being framed internally as establishing precedent for how such situations will be managed going forward. The focus, insiders indicate, is on protecting the institution rather than targeting any individual. However, the impact on the Duchess's future plans appears substantial. Her public profile and commercial ventures have been built in part on the foundation of her royal connection, even as she has pursued independence from royal duties. The new restrictions reportedly create significant constraints on how she can position herself, what associations she can suggest, and what implicit benefits she can derive from her time as a working member of the royal family. The reaction within the palace to the finalization of these measures was reportedly one of relief mixed with solemnity. Staff members who had been dealing with the complications arising from the ambiguous situation apparently welcomed the clarity, while also recognizing that such a definitive break carried emotional and relational costs. The king himself is said to have shown no satisfaction in implementing the restrictions, approaching them instead as a reluctant but necessary step in his role as head of the institution. Royal commentators and analysts who became aware of the general outline of the decision suggested that it represented a significant moment in the evolution of the modern monarchy. The question of how to handle family members who leave official duties but retain public prominence has become increasingly relevant in an age of global media and personal branding. The measures reportedly taken by King Charles appear designed to address this challenge by drawing clear lines between institutional association and personal enterprise. The timing of the decision has also been noted as significant. Coming several years after the Sussexes' departure from working royal life, it suggests that the palace initially hoped the situation would stabilise naturally without requiring such formal intervention. The fact that these measures are now being implemented indicates that palace officials concluded the hoped-for stabilisation was not occurring, and that more definitive action was required. For those observing the monarchy's evolution, this development reportedly signals a shift toward a more structured and less flexible approach to royal boundaries. The informal arrangements and case-by-case considerations that characterize previous eras are apparently giving way to clearer policies and firmer enforcement. This change reflects both the challenges posed by modern media environments and the king's apparent determination to establish firm foundations for the institution's future. The broader implications for how the monarchy operates are still being assessed by royal watchers. Some suggest that this decisiveness could strengthen the institution by eliminating ambiguity and preventing the erosion of royal authority through informal arrangements. Others question whether such rigid boundaries might create additional conflict and prevent the flexibility needed to navigate complex family situations in the public eye. Within Montecito, the full scope of these restrictions reportedly prompted urgent strategic discussions about how to proceed. The Duchess's team apparently recognized immediately that their existing plans and approaches would need substantial revision to accommodate the new limitations. Projects that had been developed with the assumption of at least implicit royal associations would need to be reconsidered or redesigned entirely. The challenge facing the Sussex household appears to be how to maintain public relevance and commercial viability while operating under constraints that remove one of the key elements that had distinguished the Duchess from other public figures and influencers. Without the ability to draw on royal connections, even subtly, the foundation of her public platform requires reconstruction on entirely different terms. Despite the palace's intention to keep the matter confidential, news of King Charles's decisive action began to leak into public awareness with surprising speed. What had been carefully guarded within the walls of Buckingham Palace and the private residence in Montecito soon became the subject of speculation, reporting, and intense media scrutiny. The question of how such sensitive information escaped official channels remains unclear, though royal observers note that decisions of this magnitude rarely remain secret for long, given the number of people who must be informed across various departments and institutions. The first signs that something significant had occurred appeared in subtle shifts within royal reporting circles. journalists who specialize in covering the monarchy began asking unusually specific questions about the relationship between the king and the Duchess of Sussex. The language used in these inquiries suggested that reporters had received tips or hints from well-placed sources, even if they lacked complete information about what had transpired. Royal correspondents, many of whom have cultivated relationships with palace insiders over years or decades, apparently began piecing together fragments of information that pointed toward a major development. Within days, what had been careful speculation transformed into more confident reporting. Articles began appearing in British and American publications citing unnamed palace sources who described the king's decision as final and irreversible. The tone of these reports varied considerably depending on the outlet and its editorial perspective. Some publications framed the story as a long overdue assertion of institutional authority, while others portrayed it as a harsh rejection that raised questions about the monarchy's treatment of the Duchess since her marriage to Prince Harry. The international media reaction proved swift and substantial. News organizations across Europe, North America, Australia, and other Commonwealth nations picked up the story, each adding their own cultural perspective and editorial slant. In the United States, where the Duchess maintains a particularly strong following and where attitudes toward the British monarchy tend to be less deferential than in the United Kingdom, many outlets expressed sympathy for her position and questioned the fairness of the king's actions. British publications, by contrast, tended to focus more on the institutional implications and the challenges the palace had faced in managing the situation. Television news programs devoted significant airtime to analysing the development, bringing in royal experts, historians, and commentators to provide context and interpretation. Morning shows in both countries featured panel discussions debating whether the king's decision represented appropriate boundary setting or excessive punishment. Social media platforms erupted with opinions from both supporters and critics of the Duchess, with hashtags related to the story trending for several consecutive days. The leak of this information created immediate complications for the Sussex household. What might have been managed as a private family matter, at least initially, suddenly became a very public crisis requiring immediate response strategy. According to sources close to the situation, the Duchess and her advisors had hoped to control the timing and framing of any public acknowledgement of the king's decision. The premature exposure of the story reportedly eliminated that option and forced them into reactive rather than proactive mode. Inside the Montecito residence, the response to this media explosion was reportedly intense and multifaceted. The Duchess's team, which includes public relations specialists, legal advisors, and brand consultants, apparently convened emergency meetings to assess the damage and determine the best path forward. These were not casual discussions, but rather high-stakes strategy sessions, recognizing that how they responded in the coming days and weeks could have lasting implications for the Duchess's public image and future endeavors. Reports suggest that multiple options were debated vigorously among the advisors. One school of thought advocated for a dignified silence, allowing the initial media frenzy to subside before making any public statement. Proponents of this approach apparently argued that engaging too quickly would only fuel the story and keep it prominent in news cycles longer than necessary. They suggested that by remaining above the fray, the Duchess could project confidence and avoid appearing defensive or desperate. A second strategy under consideration, reportedly, involved selective media engagement. This approach would see the Duchess or her representatives providing carefully controlled information to trusted journalists or appearing in a high-profile interview setting where the narrative could be shaped more favourably. Advocates for this option apparently believed that silence would be interpreted as weakness or acceptance, and that it was important to present the Duchess's perspective before public opinion solidified entirely based on palace-aligned reporting. The most aggressive option, discussed allegedly, involved a more confrontational approach. This strategy would see the Duchess using her various platforms to challenge the king's decision, either directly or through carefully worded statements that questioned the institutional practices and traditions that had led to this outcome. Some advisors reportedly favoured this approach, arguing that controversy generates attention and that the Duchess's strength has always been her willingness to challenge establishment norms. They pointed to previous instances where her most candid moments had generated enormous public interest and strengthened her connection with supporters who admire her independence. However, this aggressive approach carried significant risks that other team members apparently highlighted during the discussions. The restrictions imposed by the king's decision meant that any direct challenge to the palace could be interpreted as violating the new boundaries, potentially leading to escalated consequences. Additionally, appearing too combative might alienate moderate observers who had not yet formed strong opinions about the situation. The delicate balance between asserting her perspective and avoiding actions that could make reconciliation permanently impossible apparently weighed heavily in these deliberations. Beyond the immediate public relations challenge, the Duchess's team reportedly grappled with the longer-term strategic implications of the king's restrictions. Her brand and public platform had been constructed, at least in part, on the foundation of her royal experience and connections. Marketing materials, public appearances, and commercial partnerships had often carried the subtle suggestion of royal association, even without making explicit claims. The new rules apparently require a fundamental reimagining of how she positions herself in public and commercial contexts. This reconstruction challenge appears particularly acute in the American market, where the Duchess has focused much of her post-royal activity. American audiences have been fascinated by the combination of Hollywood glamour and royal pedigree that she represents. Removing or significantly downplaying the royal element potentially diminishes one of the key factors that distinguishes her from other celebrities and influencers competing for attention and commercial opportunities in an extremely crowded marketplace. Financial considerations also reportedly factored into the strategic discussions. Various projects and partnerships had been developed with certain assumptions about the Duchess's ability to leverage her royal connections and experiences. The restrictions imposed by the palace apparently create uncertainty about whether these arrangements can proceed as originally envisioned or whether they require significant modification. Some ventures may need to be abandoned entirely if they cannot be adjusted to comply with the new limitations. The emotional dimension of the situation also cannot be overlooked. Beyond the practical and strategic challenges, sources indicate that the Duchess experienced genuine distress at this turn of events. The sense of being formally cut off from an institution she had once been part of, regardless of how problematic that experience had been, apparently carried psychological weight. Friends and advisors reportedly spent considerable time discussing not just tactical responses, but also how to support her emotionally through this difficult period. Prince Harry's position throughout this crisis has been particularly complex. As both husband to Meghan and son to King Charles, he reportedly found himself torn between competing loyalties and perspectives. Sources suggest he has been actively involved in the strategic discussions while also dealing with his own emotional response to his father's decision. The challenge of supporting his wife while maintaining some connection to his birth family appears to have created internal conflict that those around him say has been painful to witness. As the media coverage continued and public debate intensified, the question of how and when the Duchess would respond became a subject of widespread speculation. Royal commentators analysed every public appearance and social media post for hints about her state of mind and her likely next move. The pressure to make some form of statement apparently grew as journalists and analysts offered their own interpretations of the silence, not all of which were favourable to the Sussex perspective. According to insiders, the Duchess ultimately made a decision that surprised some members of her own team. Rather than choosing confrontation or complete silence, she reportedly opted for an approach that acknowledged the situation while attempting to project composure and forward focus. The specifics of this response were apparently crafted with great care, recognizing that every word would be scrutinized and interpreted through multiple lenses. The goal, sources suggest, was to address the immediate crisis while preserving options for the future and avoiding any action that would make the breach with the palace completely irreparable.